Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of the Pair Program. I'm your host, Tim Winkler, and my co-host, Mike Gruen. Mike, how are you today, sir?
I'm doing all right. How are you doing?
Doing good. You excited for the weekend?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, weather seems to be ticking in the right direction. Pool just opened up in the neighborhood, so yeah, looking forward to it.
Do you guys have a neighborhood pool or?
Yeah, neighborhood pool.
Good stuff. We went. Actually, my wife and I went to go to our a rec center pool in our neighborhood on actual Memorial Day on Monday, and no joking, about an hour line just to get in, and then you're like, yeah, I don't want to deal with that chaos, so we just
we didn't bother with Memorial Day weekend. It's always insane, but it was one of the few things that I where during COVID they on lockdown you actually had to make reservations to go to the pool, and it was great. It was like having a private pool. It was awesome. There was very few people, and because nobody wanted to take the time. So it was nice.
It's like an app opportunity here. Cool. Well, let's go ahead and jump into a little bit of what today's topic is. So today we're going to be talking about vision aligned product development. And so, a lot of startups will tend to fail from a lack of maybe clarity or lack of vision. And it's not just from founders and leadership not having a clear vision, but it oftentimes is where the vision isn't always clearly passed down to maybe the core product and the engineering teams. And so if it's not communicated effectively as the startup scale, we see a higher uptick in failure. So we figured it was a good topic to dissect. We invited a couple of product-focused leaders today to discuss what we are calling vision-aligned product development. Both of our guests, they have extensive experience in the seat of a product manager, and both have served or are serving in product leadership roles, so VP, head of product, in startup environments for years to help us tackle this topic. So Marina and Josh, thank you both for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Cool. All right. So before we dive into the discussion, we're going to kick things off with a fun segment that we call Pair Me Up.
Pair Me Up.
This segment is where we all go around the horn. We rattle off a complimentary pairing, and we always begin with my trusted sidekick. So, Mike, go ahead and tip us off.
I do love the sidekick.
Sidekick, yeah.
I think in the first episode I was introduced as your Vanna White, so I think it's nice. In any event, we were talking about Memorial Day, Father's Day is coming up. Our family Father's Day tradition is my pairing, which is donuts and ice cream. So we go and get a cake donut, or I go and get a cake donut and put a scoop of ice cream on top, and it is great. And ever since the Dunkin' Donuts and Baskin Robbins in the same place, it just makes it really easy. You just go from one line to the next line, and there you go. So that's my pairing: donuts and ice cream.
Sounds healthy.
Not controversial, right? Exactly. I do it once a year.
we had a big debate at Hatch here about Dunkin' Donuts versus Krispy Kreme.
They're two different things.
They are two different things.
How is that a debate?
Whoa.
Yeah, Krispy Kreme is the Krispy Kreme, right? Is that what you're alluding to,
Wait,
Josh?
you get donuts at Dunkin' Donuts? I'm very confused. As a Bostonian, this makes no sense.
You just get coffee there.
I think they changed their name for a reason.
That's right.
That's true. Cool. Yeah, I can drive with ice cream and donuts. It sounds delicious. I'll jump in on mine real quick here. So I was thinking about baseball recently and wore my Nats hat here, and I was gonna go with ballparks and peanuts. I love going to baseball games. My wife and I actually met at a baseball game, and anytime we attend, we're getting peanuts for sure. And then, of course, I did some research on ballparks and peanuts. Why is this such a thing? And found this history of it that basically discussed that peanuts were never really a hit at racetracks because people needed to keep their hands free for betting. But in baseball, they say that the tension builds slowly. And so eating peanuts is part of a nervous habit where it gives you something to do with your hands. I was like, wow, it's genius. So they started selling peanuts in ballparks, and here we are. So
interesting.
That is my pairing for today's episode.
Very nice.
I'll pass it over to our guest. Marina, why don't you give us a quick intro and tell us your pairing?
Sure, thank you. So my name is Marina Simonian. I head the product management at Cromwell, which is a digital therapeutics company. We're focused on improving patient health by delivering personalized care through digital solutions and human coaching. So I would consider us a startup at this point. And prior to that, I was a product manager for about 15 years. So by no stretch of imagination, a startup at a gastroenterology specific EMR company. So the next time you go for your colonoscopy screening, whenever that is, the chances are pretty high that your whole procedure will be documented on software that my team and I created.
Cool.
That's pretty cool.
It's a cool legacy to have.
That's not your pairing, though, is it?
That's not my pairing. Thank you very much.
Colons and colonoscopies.
So as a product manager, you end up spending a lot of time in procedure rooms witnessing those. And it's a completely different experience than going through one yourself. So,
Imagine.
So for a pairing, I'll be honest, I started with food focused, since that's what seems to be the trend here. And coffee and ice cream was the first thing that came to mind.
Good pair.
But I'm going to change it up a little bit for you guys and maybe bring in a little bit more of a philosophical pairing, which is hardship or difficult situations and growth. I see you have growth through community on your wall there, Tim. And, over the years, I've learned to appreciate and eventually even be grateful for difficult situations that really are transformational, and provided that you lean into it and you're willing to learn things about yourself and the world around you. I think that's something that's really cool that pushes us forward as humans, as leaders, as product managers. So hardship and growth is my pairing here.
That's a great pairing. It's gonna be a tough act to follow.
Sorry about that, Josh.
It's really inspirational, and now I feel bad about what I had prepared. Also about work, but for us, it's a quarterly business planning season. I've been thinking a lot about roadmaps. So mine was date-based roadmaps, right? And being alone in the dark, under the basement stairs, lying in the fetal position, rocking back and forth, and contemplating the heat death of the universe. And I'm like, maybe that's too dark. I don't know, for these folks I just met. And hello, podcast friends. So we have these cats, and they really like to be outside and to go on walks. We got them harnesses. So I'm going to say cats and leashes is my pairing. That's my upbeat one. Yay!
Cats and leashes. That's nice.
Roadmaps. Sorry about that.
Well, if you threw in some sort of a music in the background to the fetal position, I think it would have
maybe some kind of like droning sound.
A cat meowing.
Some terrible atonal cat yowling.
Cat yowling.
No, I love roadmaps. I'm Josh. I've been a product manager for most of my adult life. And for the past 15 or 16 years, I've been leading very early stage product orgs. A bunch of those were at my own company, where I discovered I was a better product leader, I hope, than entrepreneur. And then at a series of early stage companies, consumer, mobile, fintech, B2B, SaaS, kind of all over the place. But I love that sweet spot of maybe like post-seed, pre-series A, the science project part of the company is finished. And now you're trying to figure out, how do we execute? How do we go to market, right? What's the difference between like a product and a company? How do we build those two things together? So really excited to be here and to learn from all of you.
That's awesome. I love how you describe that. That's a really cool way of explaining the science experiment's over. It's funny. Cool. I'm pumped. This is going to be a good one. Let's jump into it. Take the advantage of the time that we've got. So as I mentioned, we're going to be talking about, vision aligned product development. So I was doing some research on this topic, and I came across a study from PwC that showed that 54% of executives struggle to align product innovation with the business strategy. And I think part of the reason is not adequately socializing like the importance of the vision and strategy throughout the organization. And, so I think we're going to break this down for our listeners with, one, let's define like what does vision mean? How to recognize, if it is aligned throughout the different teams and how to best keep it aligned as the startup goes through these various stages of growth. But when we start with you, Marina, so maybe for context, what stage is Cronwell at? And then, how would you kind of define vision in your words?
Sure. So we are, I would say, at an early stage of definition where we do have a vision. We're going through the stages of understanding how we best deliver it, and being in a space that's digital therapeutics, which is a new industry, and a lot of companies are in this space and still kind of figuring out what does this mean and how do we deliver digital therapies in an effective way to people, right? So this is an interesting conundrum in a way where the vision of wanting to digitize the care, digitize the physician, digitize the person who's delivering the care, but how you get there and how you do it effectively, efficiently, reach the outcomes is the jury is still out. So there are many different ways of going about it. So as a definition, I guess, for what I believe a vision is, it's truly an aspirational statement, right? Of where, what you think the world is going to look like once your solution is there, and what type of problem are you solving and for whom? So those are some of the key pieces that sometimes it's hard to put into a single sentence, right? There is this almost obsession sometimes with what is our one sentence that's going to tell the world who we are. And sometimes you can get there. Sometimes it's just harder because there are so many facets that you have to define. But it's really painting a picture of how much better and how better will the world be once your solution is in place and you solve somebody's problem.
Very nice. Yeah, it's a great definition of it. Josh, anything that you would add flavor to in terms of, when you think of vision and what that means to you?
I think that definition of vision, right, being like literally looking into the future and how is the world different once you've been successful, once you have achieved your mission, right? The mission is how the world is going to be generically, right, regardless of whether or not you are the ones who cause the change. And vision is what does it mean for you to have done it? But I think this point that Marina made is really important. It's hard to write that sentence, right? And one of the things I think we do as product leaders, particularly at early stage companies, is we help scaffold the conversation for the founders, for the non-product leaders, for the people who are the visionaries, right? So that it goes from being something which is, kind of fuzzy, kind of woo-woo, not necessarily clearly articulated, to one that is actually possible to align the company behind. And one that I really like a lot comes from our friends, all of our friends, right over at ProdPad, Jana Bastow's company, which helps you develop a roadmap and a plan and a vision and all that. And they have this like template for it, which I find myself going back to all the time, right? It's, for a target customer who, right, what's the opportunity, the name of your product is, what's the category, that is the benefit, the reason to buy, unlike primary competitive alternative, which doesn't have to be another company, of course, right? Our product does what differently, right? So this is something that at my prior company, Bridget, we went through. We were expanding our product line to introduce a new capability, a credit builder program. So our vision example might have been something like, for everyday Americans who want to reduce their financial stress, the Bridget Credit Builder is a credit building savings program that minimizes cash flow needs, doesn't require changing consumer behavior. Unlike secured credit cards or credit building loans, our product doesn't force you to spend money you don't have or change your entire financial life. I'm not going to say that one is any good or one that we should use, but what I like about it is it gives you this tool to like discern, right? So that the next day, the next week, the next month, the next quarter, right? If you say that's still our product vision, that's still our company vision, it's really easy for you to say, and that's why we're not going to do these things, right? That's why we're not going to engage in this initiative. That's why we're not going to build this feature or something else, right? It gives you like a tool and a framework kind of inherently to make those decisions, which is just so important early on.
So it's interesting you bring that up. The one thing you said that I thought was interesting. product vision, company vision, because I think they are different, and feel free to argue with me. There's the company vision.
Yeah.
Because I mean, like, it's possible for, like, if I think about a company, I want to, if we're really going to be a company, we're probably going to have multiple products, right? Yeah. Not to start, but we're going to start with this product, and this product is going to have a vision, and that vision aligns to our company vision of, you know, that's that sort of more aspirational, a little more, I don't want to say vague, but doesn't really say how we're going to do it. It's just going to say more to Marina's point, what the world looks like when we, like, you know, we want to, everybody should have access to education or something, you know, whatever it is. Yeah. And it's very aspirational. And then the product visions are a little more aligned to how we're going to get there. I'm curious what your thoughts are, because I think that's like one of those areas that's it's a constant struggle in the executive like suite of, like, are we talking product vision? Are we talking company vision? And I'm just curious what your thoughts are.
Marina, I'd love to hear your thoughts, because you really took a product through like a much further
out, right?
Really mature, right? How did that work?
So I think I would agree with the fact that the company vision stays on a higher level without maybe necessarily diving into the solution, right? Or the how. And the one that I really like that I can probably share here is, I think, for the Wikipedia, you know, it's something like, we want to give free access to the world knowledge to every person in the world, right? It's something that is very aspirational and doesn't talk about how, doesn't talk, well, it does put the free in there. So it already drives how you're going to make some choices and strategies in the company, but it's very aspirational, not to use vague, to your point. But then when you go down to the product strategies, then yes, you become a lot more focused on who you're going to solve it for, how you're going to solve it, right? And become a lot more solution driven and problem definition driven, and still look back to, how does this align to, are we still solving for the larger company problem? And to your point, Josh, when it's a startup and when you're a small company, you have so much in the beginning to kind of define that. It's probably easier to a certain degree to align. When you're a much larger company with multiple product lines, it becomes that much, and you have all these layers between the leadership and the people that are making some of the choices. It becomes that much more difficult to stay true to your initial vision. And in that, I think the biggest impact that we've seen always has been moving away from, enhancement and feature factory to really focusing again on goal-oriented and solution-oriented delivery of releases or product lines that solve a specific problem that aligns to that bigger company vision.
I think back to like the startup world, right? It's probably, correct me if I'm wrong, easier to start with the product vision in a certain way, right? Like most people have an idea, like most people don't have some, I mean, maybe they do, but like, I think it's usually the case that someone's like, hey, I have this problem and I think, or I've seen this problem and I think I know how to solve it. And so they sort of start probably more at that sort of product vision of, this is what we're going to do and this is how we're going to do it. And then sort of as they get a little bit further along, and this is my experience at the startups I've been at, where it's only later after we've sort of gotten past that sort of seed round and we're maybe Series A, that we're start talking about like, well, what's really our company vision outside of our product vision? And I'm curious if that's been your experiences as well.
I'm going to push back a little bit.
Please.
I think
that's why we have
you.
you.
Describing is very common, right? But I think it also is a place where startups often get themselves into trouble. I'm not going to say it causes failure, but it maybe causes people to work harder than they have to, right? Because in some ways, it's easy to have a product vision, right? I don't say easy, right? These things are all hard, right? But it's straightforward. To have an idea for a product, we're going to build, to have some insight about the market. We're going to go ahead and build that product. But the questions of like, who is it for? And who's going to buy it? And why are they going to buy it? Are things that sometimes happen maybe later than they otherwise could. And this is a critical part about the product, right? I mean, when I'm building a enterprise SaaS product, right? The questions of how it gets purchased is really part of the product experience from the perspective of many of the users of our product, how it gets paid for, right? What the pricing model is, all these sorts of things. And, you mentioned the study asking CEOs and execs about what their challenge is, right? And it's alignment. I'm pretty sure that if you ask the very same question of the folks bottoms up within an organization, they'll say something similar, but in the reverse, right? I want to know, I need to know that what I'm doing is aligned with not just our mission for the company, but our vision for the company and the strategy that falls out of that vision. And then ultimately, objectives, key results, whatever your way of executing, right? The roadmap, executing on the strategy happens to be. And a lot of the times, we don't know all the answers to those things. Like we think we have a vision, but it's not so clear. Great. We get to put our product manager hats on, right? And hypothesis test, because that's what our job is, right? Use our, right? Okay, we have questions here. How do we go test those questions out and answer them as quickly as we possibly can? And that's why I always push, sometimes successfully, sometimes not, my CEOs to put a little more effort into articulating the company vision early on. It doesn't have to be forever. And I know we'll talk about that. Like how long does a vision last? But if you can't say it right now, it's really unlikely that you're not going to get unnecessary friction between product and sales and marketing and customer service and finance, right? This is your best tool to get those teams aligned.
So Josh, I have a question as to problem definition versus vision definition, right? So what comes first? Because it sounds like to get to a successful vision definition, you really need to hone in and probably go through those iterations of, is this an acute problem? Are people willing to pay for it? Are we truly solving for it? So what has been your experience in working with those companies on that?
What I love about templates is it kind of tells you the parts. Like I think you're exactly right. Every company has their own holes when they get started, right? A lot of times are really clear on who the customer is, right? Who are they building this thing for, right? They know it's a problem. They've seen it before, but like who exactly is a customer, right? A lot of times they don't really understand who their competition is, right? They think their competition is another company and it's really doing nothing, or it's Post-it notes or Excel, right? Or email, right? They don't understand but having like the template out there gives you the tool at least to figure out like what are the holes in our, right? Whether you're thinking about a problem statement or a product vision, what are the holes? What are the places we need to explore really, really quickly? Because if we know what the thing is we're building really clearly, but we're not sure who's going to buy it, great. Now we know where to put at least our executive attention, answering that question. And if we don't, it's easy to forget stuff. I know I'm guilty of that all the time, like missing like one key part of our vision, right? Or one key part of our strategy because I'm so focused on the stuff I feel most comfortable with.
How many places have either of you worked where, because I've definitely worked in these places where it's a it's a solution in search of a problem, right? Like that, because I think that's right. That's and like I can tell you, there was a company I worked at for they were around for 11 years before they finally hit upon what it is that their product was the best suited, like what their product could actually solve for real people. And I think that's an interesting, like who's our audience, who's gonna, like, what problems are we solving? And it's sometimes can be hard to get right.
It's easy to get excited with a solution that seems cool without really understanding who else will consider it cool and be willing to pay for it and use it. So
right,
definitely.
Yeah, I also would bring up the point that, a lot of startups growth can vary between, either like sales led growth and then product led growth too. And I've seen or I've heard that, startups that maybe they have a very unique vision or like a higher barrier to entry, and then they have a very, very strong competitive advantage. That's probably going to be a little bit more sales strategy based on like sales. And maybe like product innovation slows a little bit at this point. Whereas over a period of time, right, when that competitive advantage starts to diminish and other companies they figured out, there's similar product out there, I think that's when the strategy maybe shifts to be more of like a product led growth, because it's like now we have to figure out how do we innovate on features and what are these differentiators between what these other competitors are now doing. So I think it also depends on like what kind of market share do you have in your space on what your strategy is.
I think the nice thing about a sales-led right? And everybody likes product led. It's a better model long term. The nice thing about sales led early on is that's like the pointy part of your organization talking to customers. And your sales teams will probably have a more clear-eyed understanding of the competitive market than you do, right? It's really easy to fall in love with your product and your solution, to think you have a really big moat, only to realize, your differentiator is something that nobody else cares about. And if you aren't listening to your sales team, you miss out on that. Because I think you're absolutely right. Like, it's really easy to think you have something powerful. You have a strong mission. You're great at pitching it, right? Everybody loves it when they hear you talk about it. But when the rubber hits the road, nobody's going to buy this thing because you're not quite aligned with what the market expects out of you.
Yeah. Let's talk about like some failure stories. I think that's always fun. So we're talking about, let's just say, like product features versus product initiatives, right? So like if the leadership team is saying, we need to put these product initiatives in place to accomplish these goals, and product features, these initiatives are broken down into like maybe like smaller features. Like how do we figure out, what is priority here? Like how do you all prioritize what is most essential in this product?
Josh, you want to go? Nobody wants to talk about failures.
that sort of feels like you're asking the question here at the crux of, what makes developing new products really challenging.
And how do we choose?
Right. I mean, one answer is you talk about like the basic prioritization scheme, right? Right. Priority is value minus cost times probability. Right. And that's an easy thing to say. I think the reason I love you asking the question in the context of a vision, of a product vision, is because if you only ask those questions all the time, what you end up with is like a context-free portfolio of ideas, of stuff to build, right? And nobody buys a context-free portfolio of ideas, right? Fundamentally, they're buying a vision. And maybe your vision's wrong, maybe it needs to change, all of that. But, if prioritization isn't guided, at least pretty clearly in big chunks, right, by your vision, then again, to me at least, that's a red flag that you don't sufficiently understand what it is that you're building. Strong words. I don't want to call out any past companies, but maybe check my LinkedIn and all of them. No, I love each of you so much.
So I want to add to that you're absolutely right. And the choices that we make, right, if you don't have the clear definition of the vision, you definitely don't know the alignment. But I think it's not necessarily a failure story, but something that may have been perceived by some people, and not from a digital world. But a vision will call you to make some sacrifices sometimes, right? And to me, CVS, I think it was, I don't know, back in, when was it, 2014 or whenever they made the choice to stop selling cigarettes, right? It was a sacrifice made by a company to continue serving a vision of being a health company. So, in some cases, it's what you take out that continues keeping you true to your vision. And yeah, in most of the cases, even with digital products, right? If you ended up putting something in your product that is not being used or not supporting the overall vision that you're trying to go after, sometimes you just gotta take the axe and go after it.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've worked at plenty of places where there's a big conversation about, well, we could do that. There's definitely money there. Do we want to do that? Is that the direction we want our company to go in? Is that the business we want to be? And vision can help to make sure that you sort of stay true to something else, because you can chase a lot of things, like especially when you have a sales-led growth model, which is a great model, but there's always this like, well, if we just did this, or if we just tweaked it this way, we could make so much. Yep. And it's like, and then, which gets into a different question I do have, but I think I remember reading the Steve Jobs quote, something along the lines of like, I'm more proud of the things we said no to than the things I said yes to. And I think that idea is key, especially at the early, like you have to be really focused. It's really easy to get unfocused, and vision to me allows you to stay focused on what you're trying to do. And based on the nodding heads, I'm assuming
your beacon, it's your guiding post, right?
Right. So
if you have a good vision, then your choices are easy.
So when does that have to adjust? When is it the case that maybe you should adjust your vision and go after health nuts rather than, a convenience store? I can also say that I'm a little skeptical in terms of CVS's why they stopped selling cigarettes, but we won't get into.
It was a good example. Leave it at that.
Isn't it nice when socially beneficial visions also happen to improve your bottom line? How lovely.
Exactly.
It's all about the angle that you look at.
Right. But yeah, but again, I mean, when do you adjust vision? When do you decide that, maybe we should be that company or that product? I'm curious what your thoughts are.
I don't think a specific cadence is so important. I think what's really important in a place where I've gotten myself, wrapped around and, other founders I've seen do the same thing is if you don't give yourself permission to set it aside for a little bit. We have a vision, right? There are some holes in it. We're actively working to figure out the answers to those holes, but everything else next quarter, we're not going to think it through. We're not going to belabor it. We're going to execute on this because we're going to be so much smarter in 1 month and 2 months and 3 months than we are right now. Because very quickly it turns into sort of about second guessing yourself. This is something that I do a lot. Let's say a couple of companies ago, we found ourselves, we built a vision. We had a mission statement, great, really solid there. We had a product that was working. We were working on the vision because we found ourselves trying to do too many things, and we wanted to prioritize. And I feel like twice a day, we made pretty big shifts to our vision. And at some point, I said to the CEO, does this actually matter for what we're going to be doing over the next 2 months? He's like, well, yes, what if we find ourselves going in the wrong direction? I'm like, could we tell right now if it's the wrong direction or the right direction? He's like, well, I guess not. We had investors saying one thing. We had customers saying something else. We had prospects who hadn't signed yet saying something else, right? You should always trust people, who are trying to get you to change your product, and then they'll sign, right? So they're trying to do all those different things together, and we decided we're just going to write it down and put a pin in it, and it's going to be okay. And we're going to make mistakes, but these also won't be the only mistakes we're going to make over the next, I think it was like 2.5 months. We're going to make over the next 2.5 months, and I don't think it was correct. Like, it wasn't a great vision that we had. I think it probably could have been better if we'd spent like another day on it or another 2 days on it. But at some point we had to be like, we just gotta stop. Right? We got to go close some deals. We got to go build some stuff. We have our prioritization, right? Let's go make a couple of releases. Let's get our, engineers feeling good about the direction they're heading in. And that allowed us to actually move forward. Again, was it the right one? I don't know. Company's still doing really well. I bought my shares. But you really can't tell. And part of it is not second guessing yourself and keeping it from being paralyzing.
I would maybe just add to that I totally agree with, you don't want to be changing it too frequently, right? If you find yourself jumping from one to another month to month, that's strategery, that's counterproductive, and you want to put it on the side. So when you do want to probably consider adjusting it or changing it is maybe the market conditions change. Maybe, you're hitting yourself against the wall for too long and not realizing that it wasn't the right niche, product, solution. Something is not clicking. You definitely want to go back and revisit that, but not if you're doing it monthly. There's something bigger that needs to be solved.
Yeah, and I think the how do you I don't think there's enough. I won't say that. What I'll say is I think that companies that do well think about how they're going to measure success and know whether or not there is success, right? And so if things are going well, then right, clearly you don't need to adjust your vision. And then looking at like what isn't going well, is it that's when maybe some things need to be adjusted, but maybe it's not vision, maybe it's other things. Maybe it's your strategy on your go-to-market, or maybe you just need different whatever. But I think that setting up that criteria of how do you measure success and how do you know, like, okay, we're going to give this a month, we're going to give it 2 months. and we're going to watch this, and this is how, and see it trending in this direction or that direction. That's how we're going to know is an important part. Otherwise, I think you can end up in like if you're looking at these sort of trends daily, you end up also doing the like, well, maybe we need to adjust this, maybe we need to adjust that, and you're just constantly thrashing. Not speaking from personal experience at all there.
Never happened to me.
Yeah, visioning is that's a whole topic in itself, I think, just because, I myself, like when I started this business with Hatch IT, when you go into it in the beginning, like, yeah, you're identified a problem, you've got a solution to a problem, but you're not just, putting this perfect vision statement together. You're just you're moving fairly quickly. And I did to get to a point where I was like, I need to probably be very clear here about what this vision statement is as we grow and folks are coming in. And so I took a course actually through like an MIT management and leadership course. And the bulk of it was about like the framing a vision and how like these different like sub dimensions of visioning. And so they broke it down into like 3 main sections. And one was like framing the vision. So like, how do you communicate it? Like, how do you provide meaning for people that are working with you, and how do you help get them motivated? Because I think that was a big thing that we saw, especially during the pandemic too. Is like, folks they want to make sure that they're working within a company that they're all working towards some sort of greater change. So you also think about how do you create like urgency for it as well. Like, why is it necessary, or like what are the consequences if there's an inaction, or so like what is the benefit if the vision is achieved? And then just building that shared vision, I think, was the biggest takeaway for me, is like using language like we and using language like our, getting folks excited and motivated, I think, is one of the biggest challenges of a startup when you're especially in early stages and growing like a small team and keeping that loyalty and having folks motivated. But yeah, it's a crash course in itself.
Yeah.
And I want to
go ahead.
Sorry. I also want to ask, or kind of semi make a statement, right? So there is that vision statement that you spend all those days and hours crafting, but I feel like you always need to expand on it to really help then the rest of your teams understand what you mean by it, right? Because a lot of times you use constructs in that short vision statement that are not necessarily clear to everybody. So what have you seen maybe in your experiences? How much do people elaborate beyond that statement, and how has that helped?
Josh?
That's a really good question.
You have the most variety to
I was going to ask something very similar. I was going to say, like, what's the work? Like, how do you know if your vision statement is working? And now you ask that question in a much more elegant way. I'm trying to think about how to answer it, right? Like, it has to be useful. You can imagine, going to your board of directors and saying, well, I've got good news and bad news, right? Oh no, what's the bad news? Well, the bad news is sales are down and churn is up, and we tried a new pricing model and it's not working out very well, and CSAT is down, or NPS score is tanked. Like, oh my God, that's terrible. What's the good news? We have a really great vision statement. So like, none of us have started businesses or joined companies because we want a really strong vision statement. That isn't the product. So I guess the thing that I keep thinking about is, and I know we're kind of conflating vision and mission together, and I think it's helpful to separate them out a little bit. But the thing that I wonder is, like, how do you know if your vision statement is working or not? Right? Because again, it's really easy for it to become, I don't know, entrepreneurial navel gazing, right? And it's easy to lie to yourself and say it's really important to have a strong vision statement because that's how you keep people aligned and motivated.
But I think you're actually hitting on something, which is a vision statement versus a vision. To me, that's like having a great vision statement isn't nearly as important as having a great vision or having a well articulated, well understood vision. Like, it can be messy. If everybody in the company sort of generally knows what the vision is, even if it can't be boiled down to one sentence, I think that's an indicator that you have something that that at least it's being understood. Back to the original question, right? How do you know? Yeah. And to me, like, when the vision, like when the only time I interact with the vision is like when I got the welcome packet. To me, that's a bad sign, right? It should be coming up in lots of meetings, whether it's all hands meetings led by the CEO and quarterly updates. The vision should be, I don't want to say the vision statement is re-articulated every time. What I want to say is it's clear that from this meeting, the vision is it's just the underpinning and the core. And I don't know, I don't have a great answer of specifically how that's done, but I know it when I see it. I know when it's sort of the same as culture values or company values or whatever you want to call it, right? It can be written on the website all day long or painted on the wall, but the true measure of it is, does the organization know what they are and feel them and can articulate them in some way? So that's, anyway, sorry.
I love that. I love that. I think about a rubric, right? So one rubric I might have as an employee is looking at our vision, right? And watching what the executives do. And if I can predict what the executives are going to do, the direction they're going to take, the decision they're going to make by looking at our vision, then it's a pretty good vision, right? And if they keep on doing things which don't line up with my understanding of the vision, there's something broken, right? If the vision helps you build out the larger stack, right? If you can see the line from the vision to the strategy, to your objectives, to your key results, to your roadmap, if you can make that straight line, it's probably working pretty well. If these things seem very divorced, then
yeah, and I think that's another, the drawing the line. I usually think about it from the top down. If I can draw a line from that vision down to the work that I'm doing and can understand why what I'm doing aligns to that vision, that's a good sign, right? As an engineer or anyone working in the company.
I think one way we do it.
We start with the fact that you know the vision, right? So there are so many companies where if you ask an engineer, they won't be able to articulate the vision. So that's already thumbs up.
I'd say also a good way of reinforcing it is your customer's feedback, or for your audience's feedback. So for us, anyways, it's constantly getting some sort of feedback from engineers or candidates, and understanding throughout this process, tell us your feedback, and relaying that back to the team. I think is that motivator of this does align with how we're trying to reshape staffing or whatever it might be. This is some validation to it here at firsthand from some of the folks that are consuming this product or service, whatever it is.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's one of the best parts for me when we get our NPS comments from our patients, and you actually connect all the work that you're doing to an individual person's life that's improving. That's really where things click and you understand whether you're doing something right or wrong.
Has there ever been from a product perspective, you all maybe gathering more user feedback and then communicating back with other teams or within engineering departments, any sort of conflict on, no, that's not really how I've seen or heard the vision being communicated, or but you're coming back and saying, well, it's this is some direct feedback we're getting from the customers. Any kind of awkward interactions that you've experienced in trying to say who's got it right, communicating between different teams?
It's a little scary talking about prior companies, but I'm going to do one with a caveat. This was a long time ago. But at Alice, which is an enterprise SaaS company, we had the vision for being a product that enabled more personal relationships between vendors and clients, between customer success and customers, a tool to kind of mediate those personal relationships as opposed to impersonal ones. What we heard from our early customers was they loved the services we were providing. We were providing a services business wrapped up in a nice, affordable SaaS pricing model. And for them, that was outstanding. They loved it, right? They were getting really, really good value. And that was a wake-up call that we had a vision, but it wasn't really getting articulated in strategy and roadmap. And that caused a lot of really tough conversations. Hi, Greg. Good job since I left.
Greg, if you're listening out there, we can bleep that out.
I'll twist this to maybe, since you mentioned, communication with engineering teams, right? A lot of times, what what we've heard is an engineering perspective of how we think it makes sense for something to work versus then taking it into the field and really seeing how it works in reality. So there is the ideal technical solution always, and then there is the reality where, yes, it would be great if something happened in one place, but 3 different people need to touch it from 3 different places, right? For specifically to our past life in procedure rooms, for example, we have such a complex dynamic and everything needs to happen in parallel. So yes, connecting what a technical solution seems like makes sense and it will be easier and it just makes sense, to then taking it and observing it in the field and understanding that it's just, yes, it does, but not for these people, not in this context.
I actually very recently had a conversation with a friend of mine who works at a company that does point of sale systems for restaurants. And he was saying, like, it's frustrating that there's this whole group of engineers. It's a very large company. And they're part of it is outsourced or engineers in a different part of the world. And none of them have ever worked in food service. It's just not in their culture for like that to happen, right? That you go to college and then you get an engineering job or whatever. And he was saying, like, they just don't understand what it looks like. And so these products, these things that they make, like, this is the terrible interface for someone who's actually in food service to actually like add this new wireless point of sale system into the environment. Like, no one knows the answers to these questions. You know them because you're an engineer. Like, and that's what, the value that product obviously adds is in trying to like shape all of that. But yeah, it's interesting that the being able to put yourself in the perspective of in the context.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that one of the primary jobs that product managers have, right? Is providing that business context, that market context to the entire rest of the company, to being the evangelist for that. And you're right? If you engineers have that, have that inherent empathic understanding, that's great. And Apple has a lot fewer product managers than a lot of other companies do. Why? Because their customers are people who look like Apple employees. Right. We all carry, I have an Android phone, so I have no idea what that says about me, but like we all carry Apple iPhones around, right? We're all iPad users, right? So it kind of makes sense. You can develop that. Much harder if you're developing a tool for managing colonoscopy appointments. Right.
Absolutely.
Just to throw out a random example.
Hence your job as a product manager. You're absolutely right. To paint that picture, to put them in that context, and really make the connection.
Yeah, it's such a fascinating role because it touches so many different departments of the org. So I think we're going to have to put a bow on this segment and then transition to our next segment here. Just looking at the clock, but I guess any last statements or anything else you wanted to add before we transition? I don't know if that was, obviously there's a lot still left to uncover here, but want to be mindful if there was anything last pressing that you wanted to mention.
I think that most of us have come to the conclusion that, release earlier, release often, bring out an MVP. And I think we're comfortable mostly with that. I think our founders are comfortable most with that. The rest of executive leadership understands that. That's like the normative way to behave as a technology company. Mm-hmm. I think we have to give ourselves that same permission for the company documents, for the strategy documents. So it's okay if you have an MVP of your company vision. That's fine, right? You're never going to get it better until you have that first release version. So the one thing I'd hate for people to walk away with is like, oh my goodness, this is really important. If I don't get it just right, then, everything else is going to fall apart. Well, maybe, right? But you're not going to get it just right if you make this an entirely internal exercise. Mm-hmm.
And you won't get it right overnight.
That's right.
That's a process.
Right. And yeah, I think it's well said. I mean, and from a greater just startup philosophy too, it's just like, look, things are going to change. Like the environment is changing constantly. I think the pandemic is one of the most humbling examples of this, of, companies and products that were created due to the environment or some that just died off because of it. And now we're still seeing that happening. And so just being a little open-minded of like, yeah, what you created or whatever that statement was, 5 years ago, you can iterate on it. It's not set in stone. So just kind of keeping a flexible mindset there. Cool. All right. Well, let's go ahead and transition to the next segment called Round Out My Career. So this is a segment where we spin this community wheel behind me. It's got topics and questions that are crowdsourced from the hatchpad community. Could be anything from compensation to diversity, and we choose something randomly. So let's go give it a spin.
Let's round it out.
All right. Communication is what it landed on here. So I got one that it's current, it's top of mind right now, just given the current state of affairs in our world today. And so I'm just gonna wing it with this one because it's top of mind, and I'm curious to hear how you all are handling this. So having conversations with your team in a time when, call it what it is, there's a lot of doom and gloom being spread around in the economy, and just a lot of things that are impacting folks from outside sources, and wanting to keep your team kind of focused and heads down when there's so much noise around you. It's not a surprise here. There's talks of a recession on the horizon. Y Combinator came out with this, just terrifying message to their founders, which I thought was extremely daunting. And as somebody who works with startups and, obviously, engages with VCs and venture, there's a lot of concern in the air. And, we've seen a lot of layoffs happening. It's all a bit doom and gloom at times. How do you kind of like communicate with your team at a level that is just real, but also like not too scary of conversation, to, wanting to make sure that they're staying focused, but also the reality of a lot of startup situations is that there is a runway, right? This isn't just an infinite pool of money. And because of that, there might be just concerns of chitter chatter going around of like, well, am I next? How do I know what's happening? What level of communication do you have with your team, and how do you kind of keep them focused during times like this? I guess, Marina, if you want to start, that's a deep one, but.
So, being the Eastern European here, with a little bit of a different perspective on hardship and doom and gloom, I usually, on one hand, prefer very honest communication. So if I know that there is something coming down the pike, I do want to be honest and set the right expectations with people. But also, I know things pass. Nothing is permanent. There is always the up and the down to any situation. So on one hand, acknowledging maybe the vulnerable or difficult positions that the company may be in, or that may put somebody in, but on the other hand, looking at the upside. So, fortunately for me, I haven't had to have communications like that in the past, but if we kind of abstract to a more general statement of times are tough, there are always times that are tough. You pass through them. And when you look at it in perspective of overall how the world has evolved, we still are in a very safe and positive overall world that we're living in. So I'm an optimist. I don't close my eyes to the challenges, but I always hope for and try to create the hope for, the upswing that comes always after the down.
I love it. You brought perspective into this too, because I've got a lot of thoughts on perspective as well. But we'll try to stay focused. I'm going to pass to Josh. Josh, any comments?
Yeah, I think that broader perspective is lovely. I think there's three things I'm thinking about over here, and one of them is, as leaders in the company, one of the things that we need to do is provide perspective. Tech companies tend to be younger, right? People, with less experience under their belts, fewer jobs, fewer downturns of the economy, fewer pandemics, thank goodness, whatever it is. And part of what we need to do is provide perspective to people within our organization that things feel really acute right now, but the way things feel doesn't have to be the way things actually are, right? Feelings aren't necessarily ourselves. And that's a lesson that I think we can bring regardless. of what the specific decision action is going to be. I think it's part of what it means to be a manager and a leader. And I think it's okay to expect that from ourselves and to expect that from the other leaders at our company to provide that support to people we work with. The second is I'm pretty lazy. And as soon as you stop being honest, as soon as you start trying to soften things or share part of the story or keep things close to the vest, you're working really, really hard. Who can I tell? Who can't I tell? We hire like really smart people in all of our companies. Like, what's the point of working so hard on hiring if we don't expect these people to be smart? If they're smart people, they're going to figure out what's really going on. And honesty is just a lot less work than having to, scramble at the end or have people ask questions. So I'm lazy. Be as honest as possible. I think the third thing to this is, it's easy to have values when things are easy. And this is a moment for us as leaders to demonstrate the role that values can have inside of the workplace, which I think for everybody I've ever spoken to feels pretty important to them, right? We spend at least 8 hours a day, 5 days a week at our places of work. It's a big part of our lives. It's a big part of all of our identities, right? I know this about the three of you. I know this about everybody I've ever worked with. Our colleagues aren't okay, right? Whether they should be or shouldn't be, if they're parents, they're coming off of 2 years of worrying about their kids at school. Maybe they've had family members or friends who've gotten really sick or who have died. The news, fair or not, is full of some really scary stories and some really scary images. Speaking just of myself, I'm not somebody who has a lot of emotions, but the latest shooting in Texas really, really hit me. I got 2 kids. I spent a week, seeing my kids' classmates' faces when I thought about those kids in Texas. There doesn't have to be a logic behind it to realize that a lot of people are in a tough spot. And bringing empathy and understanding for where they are is, first of all, again, back to being lazy, and makes your job much easier because we're naturally empathic, naturally nice people. None of us are naturally assholes, right? So letting yourself do the natural thing is going to be a lot less work. But also, it's a really great opportunity to build the kind of trust and the kind of loyalty that we need when it comes to, okay, things are hard, but here's a place where I can impact the world. Here's a part of the world that I can put work into and gain some feeling of control over. That's going to help me feel better. And frankly, success of the company, is part of personal success as well.
Cool. Yeah, well said.
Yeah. You basically stole mine. Empathy. That was pretty good.
No, Mike's is just the lazy part.
Yeah, that's 100%. No, I was going to go, instead of, I wouldn't frame it as honesty. I'd frame it as transparency.
Nice.
But it's the same general concept, right? Being transparent. Yeah. This is what's actually happening. I think being able to be transparent about this is our plan. This is how we're trying to address it. Or being transparent and saying hey, there's a lot of things in motion right now. We don't have all of the answers. We're working on it. I think that goes a long way back to you have smart people, you hire smart people. Smart people understand that sometimes coming up with that plan takes a little bit of time, and they can also recognize when you don't have a plan, but pretend that you do. So, I've always appreciated, and talk about context and perspective. I worked in the 90s during the .com bubble, and when that happened, and I saw a lot of people lose jobs and whatnot. And I remember, the company I was at there during that time, and our CEO just coming in and being like, "Look, this is the situation. We thought we were going to do this merger. Everything fell apart, and we're totally shifting gears, and we're going to do this thing." And I really appreciated all of the transparency, all the way, from top to bottom on what that was. So that's a big one. Empathy, I think, is just a company value. If you work at a company that's not empathetic, you should find a different company. Same thing a little bit with transparency, but I don't want to be too hardcore. But yeah, I think those are the big ones. And then having that plan, and also sometimes when there's doom and gloom, not to be more whatever that's called, there's a word for it, but sometimes there's opportunity in, even though there's something bad happening, that sometimes that creates opportunity, and being able to talk about that. I can talk about with a shift in careers, right when during the pandemic, there was this huge shift of people from restaurants and service industry into other businesses, like that, there was opportunity that was created by that. It was very doom and gloom for the restaurant industry. Don't want to underplay that, but sometimes that those shifts can create opportunities. So just because there's something doom and gloom doesn't necessarily mean it's doom and gloom for you or your company. And you just have to handle that in a very respectful way. Like, I think that's also key, to not make it look like you're being opportunistic or, anything along those lines, but to recognize that opportunity is there.
Cool. Yeah, I would just mirror the transparency word. I think was a big one that comes to mind for me as well, because I just put yourself in the shoes of others, and how would you want to be informed of what's going on, versus this a secrecy of like, I can't tell you anything until it's too late. So yeah, giving folks some heads up, giving folks the ability to prepare if it is a worst case scenario. But then something that I would also tap into, which I think, we're all kind of saying as well, is like leaning into past experiences that may have been similar. And it wasn't too long ago that COVID came upon us and the world completely flipped on its head. And we are all still here. And how did we get through it? And relating to those experiences and those stories, I think have been really helpful when I have conversations with my team about what's going on right now, is leaning into that and reminding them that this isn't the first time, like we've been through an up and down, and that's also why we reinforce when we bring folks on. Like, loyalty is one of the biggest things that I really buy into from a value, from a trait for folks within startup ecosystems, is specifically for that reason alone, of like, you can't get scared and then just start, looking elsewhere, or jumping ship because the water's got a little rocky. So for the folks that stick it out, they're the ones that really kind of get it and, really appreciate that transparency as well. Cool. Man, we got deep. Now I definitely need to get a drink.
Cheers.
Thank you guys both for joining us and sharing some knowledge and some past experiences with us. I think it's really valuable stuff. And again, I think there's a lot that we can build on this specific topic. But again, thank you so much for joining. And if there's anywhere specific that you want to shout out, that where folks can maybe connect with you or tap you for advice, feel free to shout it out now. A lot of folks mention LinkedIn or Twitter or whatever.
Yeah, LinkedIn is the only place where I live. So
cool.
LinkedIn is great. My parents gifted me with an unbelievably great name for SEO. So always happy to connect.
Awesome. All right. Well, that's a wrap. Thank you all so much.
Thank you guys for the opportunity.
No worries.
Thanks.